percentage for research, and the topic was sort of farm to the plate. We need better nutrition education. We talked about providing fruits and vegetables to people in a lot of different cultural contexts, and talking about competence in how to prepare those foods. So we talked a lot about basic food programs that exist and the money for the programs. We talked about investing in teaching how to do respectful advocacy, how to have difficult conversations and emphasize cultural competence. But then we went to a lot of conversation about SNAP benefits and the process, the complicated process that can exist on applying and reapplying for benefits. Talked about how we know that when the SNAP or whatever the benefit comes out each month, there's a decrease at the time in crime and maybe domestic abuse situations, and then as the food money for the food disappears, those problems reappear. We talked about how do we teach the 75,000 to be self-sufficient, an application of what we know. We talked about SNAP again, and talked a lot about community gardens and how community gardens can be a good idea, but some of the problems that exist in involving communities in being able to utilize those gardens. How important growing our own food is. Talked about reducing application roadblocks, simplifying application processes, eliminating barriers for people to access benefits. And then there was a lot of conversation at the end about Black farmland ownership. Talked about tax policies and land trusts, how laws need to apply for small farmers as well as large corporations. Talked about access to land, what it means to be profitable, to be seen as a landowner, a farm owner. Talked about the missing links between I want to farm, but getting access to the land and being profitable. That was some of our highlights.
Thank you. Do we have someone for the second group?
So when we started this, I said, I will take notes, but I will not report out. So here I am doing exactly what I didn't want to do. We talked about a lot of different things than the first group did. We talked about adequate SNAP benefits for households, how the benefits run out before the end of the month. So it seemed that fell under the nutrition portion of that. And also to kind of tie in with climate and nutrition it was startling that 40% of the food that goes into landfills. So we also talked about composting, making it easier to compost, making it easier to rescue food so that it doesn't go to a landfill, be it that it's food that's already been produced and cooked, or be it food that has just been grown by a farmer and hasn't made it to market. So saving that before it goes into the landfills. We also talked about equity when it comes to addressing SNAP benefits for all people of the United States, be it a territory or actually being part of the United States. Do you know that in certain territories, they do not qualify for SNAP? It is a program called Nutritional Assistance Program. It's a block grant. They don't receive equal benefits. Also, it was mentioned about TFAC earlier, that if on a tribal lands, if you receive food distribution program on Indian reservations, you are not eligible for SNAP. You can receive TFAP, and be eligible for SNAP, but you cannot receive Big Dipper, as I've learned acronym for it, and receive SNAP also. That is an equity issue. When COVID the COVID relief bills, when it expires, how are people going to be able to make that difference up when they've received the full emergency allotments, and now it's going, for their SNAP benefits, it's going to go back to what they received before. These are equity issues that need to be addressed, as well as nutritional. This is where Reverend Hamlin, she was so eloquent on this, where we addressed equity and the bill for reparations for African Americans, as well as our territories, as well as tribal lands. When the funding for debt relief was left out of the bill, we've got to work on making this equitable when we do this work. There's so many different words talked about with this. Is it culturally meaningful? Is it culturally relevant? But in talking about the foods that we provide to people, is it the food that they actually is what their diet consists of? I mean, it can be a lot of different things. It can be a chronic disease that they have, such as hypertension or diabetes. They need certain foods, so we need to be able to meet the needs of the people with their diets. We have to address the issue of climate change, or farming is not going to be something we talk about. Also talked about if you want to have an educated workforce, you want people to go back to work, you don't want them on SNAP. Well, we have to have an educated workforce, and to do that, children have to be fed. That's where we need to start. So that's not a farm bill necessarily. That ties into the child nutrition reauthorization. Both programs do feed families and children and seniors to people who are disabled. So.
Question for you. Is there anything in the Inflation Reduction Bill that the President just signed that contains any provisions at all for smaller farmers?
So the President just signed this massive piece of legislation. There are some smart agricultural money available. There are going to be grants available, to be determined by USDA how that's going to be spurred out and who can apply to the grants. But there was, in the American Rescue Plan about a year ago, Congress passed a massive piece of legislation, and there was some debt relief for black farmers. Got caught up with the courts, but now in this new bill, they brought in the definition to let that money out. So now that debt relief is available.
That's what I thought.
So there is some debt relief available in the upcoming piece of legislation. Yes.
Okay.
But the broadening of that actually made it such that the legacy black farmers don't get the debt cancellation that they were owed and were supposed to get. So there are still ways in which that repair is not happening. And that largely falls on Bill Sack and Biden, because he shouldn't have appointed him, right? So, I mean, I just don't want people to think that the black farmers, particularly those that represented with Eva Clayton, who some of us remember when she was in Congress, and she fought so hard for this. It happened, and then the U.S. government, because that's what happens, right? They, when white farmers say, oh no, this is not right, then all of a sudden they acquiesce. And then so it gets broadened per se, but broadened such that the people who really are supposed to get it don't get it. And the rest of the black farmers then continue to have their farms foreclosed on. So I just don't want people to think that, you know, the debt cancellation happened. It did not. That's why black farmers are still crying out.
No, I 100% agree.
Okay.
Thank you for having these difficult conversations with us. I don't know about you, but this is a lot more than I thought it was going to be. Next group, do we have our note-taker presenter?
have nothing to do with the point of this next note page. Yeah.
47 years, can you believe it? We had an interesting group of people. We had representatives from out of the garden. Yeah, sorry to be here. We had an interesting group of people. Obviously, I'm not the expert in this, we had an interesting group of people, of folks from Greensboro Ministry and Out of the Garden and Cone Health and other interested citizens, and I'm a little less certain about what they do. But at any rate, what Greensboro Ministry said is that they had actually some reduction of numbers a little bit during the pandemic because people were getting the assistance from the government. And so that actually helped them, but the numbers are rising again as that has been cut off and with inflation. And the comment was, well, we'd much rather see an increase in SNAP and direct assistance programs to provide food and empower people rather than having people coming to food pantries or food giveaways such as Out of the Garden. So there was a lot of discussion of that, as well as raising the minimum wage and extending the child tax credit and full funding of SNAP and WIC and other programs. There was also some discussion of how is it decided what's covered by these programs. For example, non-fat milk is covered, but whole milk is not, regardless of what your nutrition needs might be, and hot meals are not covered at all by the SNAP benefits. So there was discussion on those kinds of things as well. Interestingly, Cone Health is just completing a tri-county survey of community health needs and best practices, included school meals and the SNAP benefits to be sure that people are being fed. But their research showed that with the eligibility requirements being what they are and the length of time in which benefits are provided, only meets 61% of the needs in these 3 counties. So there's still a lot of significant need, and that some of the requirements are the big problem there, that the income is so low, or if you have low income and you have the benefit, but then you get Medicaid or Medicare, you suddenly then have a massive slash in your food program, so it's simply not adequate for the working poor. And the other issue is, how do we get the word out? Because some people, for whatever reasons, do not apply for the program. There was also discussion that there needs to be more rural development, and that Black farmers have gotten a raw deal, and there needs to be more funding for equity and opportunities for Black farmers. And we also discussed that we certainly agree with the nutrition, equity, and climate issues, but wanted to know a little bit more about what the climate aspects of the Farm Bill would look like. And there was discussion of farming methods and products that might reduce greenhouse gases, and food and dumps and that kind of stuff, and food reclamation, which Greensboro Ministry and Out of the Garden both do. So, and there was also the comment that North Carolina and Nebraska have the strictest codes in the country of health guidelines in terms of temperature, storage, and expiration dates, which leads to a lot of food being dumped and not utilized. So that might need to be looked at as well.
In the, can you talk about those dates in the Emerson Act, maybe?
Yeah, there's some legislation that we've supported to change. To have accurate labeling, because some of the food could still probably good, but just because it reaches that expiration date, it has to be thrown out, especially fruits and vegetables. So that is something that we've been looking into.
And if you grabbed handouts, there was a sheet just on the Emerson Act.
I love what you do, but surely you could have come up with a better representative.
Okay. So how many more groups do we have left? Just one more? 2? Okay, great. Do you want to come next? Thank you.
Plus the conversation was pretty much familiar with me, so I think I'm pretty good to do this. The concern that we had was more of an agricultural type of concern, specifically like,
Put them.
can you hear me now? I thought I was loud enough. The concern that you people know how to garden, right? We want the nutrition for the children and families, but if you don't know how to garden, how do we feed them nutritious, the right nutrition that they need? So what we were thinking or hoping that could be funded is teaching the children how to grow food. They can learn in schools. We're hoping we can, we have agricultural clubs and things in school. But it would be awesome if we had empty land available in the towns and communities that we know of, that the schools could know of, and actually use that with the children to be able to teach them how to garden, the entire process of keeping it, as well as snacking from it. In our group, a lot of us were very familiar with either our parents or grandparents that had gardens, and they would play outside and then grab from the garden and eat, and that's important because right now kids snack on chips and, things is convenient for them to eat from, and versus thinking that the garden is convenient. So then you teach them how to garden, but then they need to learn how to cook. So we were discussing how important that could be in school. See, this can start from a young age to keep it in the future, keep future farmers in America, right? So you teach them how to cook the food, and then you know that they're getting the nutrition that they need. We were also discussing about the community gardens with the local farmer markets to double the SNAP at the farmer markets, right? So they could be able to use their SNAP to get more vegetables there and fruits from our local markets, creating more of a demand for farmers to get funded to consistently create this or produce the vegetables and fruits that they need. Also, more access to fresh fruits and vegetables, of course. Personally, I am a member of the Evangel Fellowship Church of God, and we were blessed to have a member there that was able to see the vision through God. He's a science teacher, and he created the idea that we can create our own garden, right, with PDYNF. And they created this garden, and this garden is feeding the community for free. So we have in 2020, when the grocery stores were closed, the vision came from our pastor that we build, we have our pantry at the church, and we build boxes for the families. And in these boxes, they have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And as we said, with nutrition, we want to make sure they get the grains, the vegetables, the good stuff that, we're not feeding them junk food, but things that they need to survive. And we did this during the entire pandemic, and that vision increased from God to our pastor, who increased the serving of 100,000 meals to serve in 2021. And as we did that, we realized, okay, that's when the science teacher or the member of the church said, okay, well, let's do a form too. And at first, as he stated, it didn't go as good because we have to learn. And but the harvest came, and we ended up feeding over serving over 102,000 meals for that year. And you would think with that goal, we would say, okay, prices is going up on food. We're grocery shopping this food. Volunteers are coming out weekly from A&T and my children, our children from the congregations coming out, and the adults, they're working hard every single week. And you would think we would say, okay, 100,000 again, but no, God increased that to 200,000 meals to serve. And so far, as of now, we've served over 120,000 meals. So it's, and the harvest is growing. We picked 16 to week. And every Thursday, I am able to be privileged to see the families come through. We have elders, we have residentials, we have women's shelters that we supply to. The schools are opening back up, so we do deliver to schools, daycares. We do this in direction of Christ, but the importance is because we want to make sure that even though there are people that a certain middle class can afford food, right? We still are hungry, and the prices are going up. And as a single mother to children in a middle class, you don't get the support that others do, which I'm grateful to what I have and what I can give. But in reality, if those gardens and those farms stop, then that's increasing our money from our household to feed our children. So these farmers that are giving and what we're doing with the vision of God that is being supported and funded in scholarships and grants that we are reaching for, it is helping every single household from poverty to high class. We all need food to survive. So that was part of our conversation, and we were hoping that maybe we could share this through social media. Children love social media, so it was a good idea. A lady said, you know, maybe having schools set up apps or churches set up apps where kids they have fun coming together and they can make TikTok videos or do videos where they can learn how to cook. And, you know, there's so many people that do recipes online and they do these, but what if you show them there's a farm right here in your local area and they show them how to grow it and then pick it and clean it and cook it, all in the videos, and it gets supported to where children will weekly, you know, oh, let me learn how to cook squash today, and to actually have families gather together like we used to traditionally and cook together with their children that can then be able to teach their children, we can consistently keep nutrition in the home. And lastly, we talked about food trucks. We have a lot of food trucks around that gives, you know, the funnel cakes and, you know, all the good stuff, the fried Oreos, the fried foods, right? So good, but wouldn't it be important, or would it be awesome if we could get a produce truck that comes through? And whether it's just for the people that give and donate, there's still a food truck there for them to choose healthy and make that choice consciously within themselves to help them to look, you know, for better foods to eat and have that access in the communities that do not have it, such as where there's a lot of food swamps. So that was our conversation.
I think we have one more group and then we'll quickly wrap up things.
Did everyone complete this for me? Because I really want to follow up with every single person. If you could just pass it around, and if you didn't fill it out, please fill it out for me. Sure.
What Shamika talked about?
What Tamika talked about, the ideas, the vision that she shared in terms of what they're doing, those are some of the tenets or the ideas of the Black Church Food Security Network. So I'm hoping that when you sign, or if you haven't signed what's going around today, if we can use that, those lists to contact you as we move along in building the Black Church Food Security Network in Greensboro and Bedford County, I really would appreciate it.
And can I just add, we actually partner with the Black Church Food Security Network. They trained a whole group of folks in Orlando, Florida, and we probably have about 30 or 40 churches. It's not just for Black churches. If you want to be a real ally, get involved, learn how you can help, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. First, for my group, if I forget something, please share it. I mean, I've got everything. Okay, one thing we talked about was the issue of affordability of housing. If you're paying more for your rent, then you can't afford to buy good food. We're talking about how in Greensboro right now, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,000 a month. Well, if you're only getting $1,200 or $1,300 for your Social Security, how are you going to be able to afford to buy food? In our group, we were lucky enough to have a guest with us from Kenya, and she was talking about the issues there that are caused by the war in Ukraine. They're not getting the grain supplies from Ukraine that they normally get. And she was saying, it's not just affecting Kenya, it's affecting everybody. We're all in this together. And one thing she was stressing was, as other groups have talked about, teaching people how to grow their own food. Because in some situations, you can have all the money in your bank account, but if you go to the grocery store and there's no food, which happens in a lot of places around the world, there's no food to buy. But if you grow your own food, won't go hungry. Another thing we talked about was the need to develop equity to fix past wrongs. It's great and wonderful to say, okay, we're gonna give every farmer this, or we're gonna have this program available for all the farmers, but we need programs that fix the wrongs that happened in the past. We need to fill in the holes that were created in the past, and also remember that a lot of these inequities are still continuing today. Another thing we talked about was minimum wage for farm workers. I'm not sure if that's in the Farm Bill. Okay. Let's see, teaching people growth and as has been discussed, community gardens. The one thing has been mentioned is the Black Food Network. In case you're not aware of this, is starting here in Greensboro and around the area. A lot of churches have these beautiful spaces out in front. So they have a lot of space in the back where gardens can be started to grow food there, and also working with Black farmers. I know some churches started setting up, they're selling their food after church on Sundays. The farmers will bring their food to the church and set up in the parish hall and sell the food right there. So that is a fantastic program. I think that's, did I forget something? Okay.
Thank you. One of the things that I do want to quickly address is, farm workers' rights and farm worker visas. It's one of the things that has traditionally not been addressed by the Farm Bill. There is some movement to try to get some provisions in there that would help workers. There's some new reports that we're looking into, but it's something that issue that we look at and we have been advocating separately aside from the Farm Bill and other pieces of legislation. But there are some reports and we're looking at some recommendations as well into that as well. So thank you for bringing that up. Well, I want to turn it back over to Florence. Thank you so much for all this important feedback. We've been recording this session, so we will be taking all of these policy suggestions and solutions you all have suggested. A lot of these programs we're looking to be scaled up in the Farm Bill, or looking to present to Congress some of the ideas that you've all have shared. In the next couple of months, we'll be releasing our change agenda, and happy to share with all of you, and look forward to continuing this conversation as we continue as the reauthorization begins next year. So I'll turn it back over to Florence.
I just wanted to invite Jordan. Is there anything that you want